Spider-Man is getting a brand new day, and if you think this is just another installment, you're already missing the bigger picture. This story is tied to one of the most controversial Spider-Man arcs ever written. It ties into the multiverse reset, ties into the M-word, mutants, and a very terrifying version of Peter that you might have forgotten. So, today we're going to be checking out this story. How deep it really goes. We're going to be looking at the key takeaways that you should probably know before watching Spider-Man Brand New Day. So get your lunchbox ready, stay tuned, and let's get into it. Welcome to Off the Cliff, where we do the homework so you don't have to. Spider-Man just came out with an amazing trailer, setting off the story for Brand New Day and giving us a look into who Peter is after his whole entire debacle with Doctor Strange and erasing his existence from reality. On today's episode, I want us to take a look into the sources that this movie will adapt its story from. And hey, maybe we might get a sneak peek into what to expect from the new installment of MCU Spider-Verse. Also, spoiler warning, we will be looking at Brand New Day sources, so this video will spoil the movie for you regarding the 31st July release. So if you still have the spider fever, I recommend you go check out previous video on the 3 Spider-Mans and maybe skip this one. One More Day. To understand Brand New Day, we need to look at what came before it. One More Day. Spider-Man One More Day, released in 2007, is a Spider-Man controversial storyline. Following the events that transpired in the comic book Civil War, issue number 2, released in 2006, Spider-Man aka Peter Parker makes one of the most consequential decisions in his history. In support of the Superhuman Registration Act, requiring all superpowered beings to register, unmask, and act under government control, Spider-Man publicly unmasked himself on a nationally televised press conference. This is to show his support and to prove that registration is both safe and necessary. This would be akin to the Sokovia Accords that we saw in Captain America Civil War, released in 2016. Anyways, the reveal causes chaos. It makes his family a target, and the result is Aunt May is shot by a hitman hired by the Kingpin. This is what takes us into One More Day. In One More Day, while Aunt May is dying in hospital, and with no conventional medicine or superhero technology able to save her, Mephisto, aka MCU's Devil, approaches Peter and Mary Jane and proposes a deal. He posits to save Aunt May's life, but instead of Peter's soul, he demands the couple's marriage. Peter and MJ painfully agree, history is rewritten so that they were never married, and the world's memory of Peter's secret identity is completely wiped. Peter wakes up, living with a healthy Aunt May, and enters the new era titled Brand New Day. Now, the main difference between the comic and the movie is the motivation, the sacrifice, and the result. In the comic, Peter makes a controversial deal with the devil to save Aunt May's life by sacrificing his marriage, and in the movie, Peter makes a heroic sacrifice with Doctor Strange to save the multiverse. While the comic book primarily erases his wedding and restores his secret identity, the movie spell is far more nuclear, erasing Peter Parker's very existence from reality. Other than that, the comic and the movie kinda follow a similar storyline. New villain, who it is? The era of Brand New Day introduced one of Spider-Man's most underrated villain, Mr. Negative, and if this movie is following the Brand New Day comic storyline, then there's a huge chance that we might finally get to see him on the big screen. But before we talk about why we might finally see Mr. Negative make his appearance, we need to understand who he is. And for those who didn't play the Sony PS5 Spider-Man video game, I feel we need to touch a little bit on his history because he isn't just some villain of the week. Mr. Negative, real name Martin Lee, made his first appearance in Free Comic Book Day, The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 1, released in 2007. However, he made a proper full debut in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 546, released in 2008, which also marked the beginning of the Brand New Day storyline. He is one of Spider-Man's most unique villains, living a double life just like Peter Parker. By day, he is Martin Lee, a kind philanthropist, and by night, he's Mr. Negative, the crime lord of Chinatown. From the beginning, Mr. Negative wasn't just another villain, he is directly tied to Peter Parker's personal life. Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, runs the Food, Emergency, Aid, Shelter, and Training, aka Feast, the same shelter Aunt was helping out at, and the same one that took in the multiversal displays Osborn in No Way Home. Yeah, that shelter. Long story short, Peter Parker ends up trusting him and working alongside him, even though he fights him at night. Moving on, this is why I think we're gonna see him make his appearance. And just to remind you, these are my own personal thoughts and opinions, so please take it with a grain of salt. Number 1. If this movie is following the Brand New Day storyline, then you cannot ignore the most important new villain. Mr. Negative is basically a direct product of Brand New Day era, introduced right after the reset. He's not some old school villain and only becomes part of Spider-Man's story after everything changes. Number 2. Marvel is clearly moving Spider-Man away from the multiverse chaos and bringing him back to a grounded city-level storytelling. This is Mr. Negative's playground. As the crime lord of Chinatown, he is basically grounded within the street-level crime ethos. You literally cannot tell a street-level Spider-Man story without him, especially if you're adapting Brand New Day. Number 3. Marvel already introduced the Feast Shelter, which is directly tied to Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. I don't think that's a coincidence. But hey, we'll see as more is revealed about the movie. It's a man, it's a spider, it's a man-spider? There's a version of Spider-Man that isn't a hero, well, technically not even human. This is a version where Peter Parker completely loses control. This is Man-Spider. Man-Spider made his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 100, released in 1971, when Peter tried to get rid of his powers and instead made things worse. This is a classic experiment gone wrong trope. Anyways, Peter grows extra arms, exhibits animalistic behavior seen through a loss of intelligence, control, and him transforming into a, well, man-spider. Though that may be his origin. For a lot of fans, Spider-Man the Animated Series, released in 1994, is where Man-Spider became unforgettable. The transformation specifically occurs in Season 2 in an episode titled Neogenic Nightmare. In this episode, Peter Parker discovers his DNA is continuing to mutate following the original spider bite. This mutation disease initially causes him extreme pain and eventually leads to him growing 4 extra arms. Peter transforms into a man-spider, a giant feral 6-armed beast that can spit acid and produce webbing through all limbs without the need of web shooters. He's eventually cured through the combined efforts of the Punisher, Kraven the Hunter, and Dr. Mariah Crawford. Though Man-Spider doesn't make an appearance in the Brand New Day comics, it seems the MCU are going to be adapting parts of his story in the Brand New Day release. Reason being that Spider-Man's condition is used as an organic bridge to introduce mutants into the story. This is seen where Peter Parker goes to the X-Mansion to consult with Dr. Charles Xavier in hopes that he can cure him. Okay, so before we continue, I need to differentiate between a mutant and a mutate. A mutant is a person who is born with the genetic mutation, allowing him to either be born with the power or gain it later through an external trigger. A mutate is a person who isn't born with the power, but his DNA gets mutated through external force. You know, the classic falls into a vat of acid or, well, gets bitten by a spider type of trope. Anyways, the connection between Man-Spider and Spider-Man can be inferred within the trailer. My reasoning is this. The trailer shows Peter Parker emerging from a massive web-filled cocoon. In Marvel lore, this signifies a metamorphosis where he sheds his human limitations to embrace his arachnid side, a process often linked with the Man-Spider storyline. Number 2. The cocoon phase results in Peter developing organic webs that he can shoot directly from his wrist. This webbing is shown as stronger and more versatile than his synthetic version, a direct biological product of the evolution. Number 3. Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, appears in the trailer, explicitly warning Peter that his DNA is mutating in a way that's extremely dangerous. In this instance, while looking back at the Spider-Man animated series, he will be replacing Dr. Connors, aka the Lizard's role. Number 4. Rumors suggest that Sadie Sink will be debuting as Jean Grey, a catalyst that introduces the mutants within the MCU universe. The trailer also supports this by showing that Spider-Man will be aiding or be hunted alongside Jean Grey by the Department of Damage Control while his body undergoes a mutation, increasingly becoming non-human. And though Man-Spider hasn't been officially confirmed in any way, shape or form, this suggests that we might finally get to see him. Hello Felicia, Gwen, and maybe Harry. Okay, so Brand New Day represents new challenges and new beginnings for Peter Parker. It might also mean new relationships alongside the new villains that we might get to see, and 3 of the most important people in Peter Parker's life could be about to make their debut in the MCU. This would be Gwen Stacy, Felicia Hardy, and Harry Osborn. Starting with Gwen. Gwen Stacy made her first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 31, released in 1965. She was Peter Parker's first true love during his college years at Empire State University, where they met. Reason I believe that she might make her MCU debut is because in the Brand New Day trailer, Peter is seen wearing an ESU sweater. This heavily suggests that he is a student at the university, which fits into when and where Peter met Gwen. However, there is a certain nuance to this and it may not end up being adapted. I personally think that it makes more sense to introduce Felicia than to introduce Gwen at this stage. Speaking of which, Felicia Hardy made her first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 194, released in 1974. Debuting as a seductive and unpredictable anti-hero we know as Black Cat, she is a master thief, a master martial artist, and the daughter of a world-renowned burglar, Walter Hardy. Originally meeting Spider-Man as an adversary, she eventually becomes his romantic partner and one of Peter's most trusted, albeit complicated allies. The twist here is that she is attracted to Spider-Man and not Peter Parker. The reason I think she'll make an appearance in Brand New Day is because, just like Gwen, she attends at ESU University, and her time at ESU University forms a critical part of her origin story. This is because as a freshman at ESU, Felicia experiences high-level trauma which drives her to drop out of school and dedicate her life to mastering martial arts, gymnastics, and lockpicking. Her original goal is to seek revenge. However, unable to do so, she decides to follow in the footsteps of her father and became Black Cat. Long story short, ESU forms part of her origin story, and with Peter being alone and single, she is the perfect replacement for the MJ dynamic, or a potential love triangle between Peter, MJ, and her the story could explore. Lastly, we have Harry Osborn. Now, Harry does not need any introduction, however, we do need a refresher course on him just to see what he's about. Harry Osborn made his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 31, released in 1965, as the son of Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. In this instance, his role was that to be of Peter's best friend. Sorry, Ned. Anyways, his appearance in Brand New Day is marked by 2 theories, the new best friend theory and the hobgoblin twist. Exploring both, we'll start with the best friend theory. Since the MCU Peter is now totally alone, the movie might introduce a fresh new take on Harry Osborn at ESU. This would mirror the Brand New Day comic arc where Harry Osborn is reborn into the timeline to give Peter Parker a new social circle. Number 2. The Hobgoblin twist. There is heavy speculation that instead of Green Goblin, this version of Harry would be embarking the Hobgoblin, working under the new mayor of New York, Kingpin. This would replace Ned Leeds taking on the mantle of Hobgoblin, as famously iterated in the comic books The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 238, issue 256, and issue 289. This suggests that the movie might pivot to the comic Ultimate Spider-Man Earth 1610 and the 2017 animated Spider-Man series where Harry is seen becoming the Hobgoblin instead of Ned Leeds. However, as I've said before, all this is unconfirmed, so take this all with a grain of salt. Fakaletwa, you boy. Anyways, those were the most important key takeaways and information that you should probably know before going into Spider-Man Brand New Day, releasing on the 31st of July 2026. And like I've said before, though none of this have been confirmed, they do perfectly line up with everything we know so far about the release. And if all this is true, I can bet you my last 2 rants that we're gonna see some of these things come to fruition. Well, that's all we have for you today on Off the Cliff. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and as usual, I'm Cliff, you're a nerd. Join me next time on Off the Cliff, brought to you by mzansinerds.